I wouldn't even have considered it had I not found trans material online. That is a fact. What I call my gender dysphoria developed when I was in my mid-teens after some horrible experiences. I was like, I fucking hate being a woman, I hate being a woman. I went online and I found trans blogs and I found trans blogs and I found trans articles and I joined a trans forum, and that was it. I went from being a woman that hated being a woman to being a trans man, and I needed to transition, and I had gender dysphoria, and if I didn't transition, I was going to kill myself. That's what I said. Not necessarily because I believed it, but that's just what you said. That was what was said on the forums. It's like, it saved my life. Transition saved my life. And I used to say that shit. And now I'm detransitioned. I have permanently and irreversibly altered my once healthy body. It's very hostile out there for detransition people. You're rejected by the LGBTQA2++ alphabet soup. All of your friends will abandon you for being an apostate. And then you will go to your medical or mental health professionals and they won't want to have anything to do with you because they don't want to be accused of acknowledging that maybe something's wrong, that maybe we shouldn't be doing affirmation only, that maybe we shouldn't be just throwing talk therapy out the window in favour of just, here's your hormones. Detransitioners or people considering detransition message me and they'll say things like, how long before I go back to how I used to be? You'll never be how you used to be. Transition is largely irreversible. You can't unthicken your vocal cords. You can't undo the hair loss that you suffered. I mean, look at that. That's my receded hairline right there. And I've got a wee baldy bit in the back of my head. That's permanent. I still grow a beard. That's permanent. I can't magically grow my tits back, so that's permanent. And then there are other physical changes of which I will spare you the details of, but they're permanent. Just dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of detrans women that I've spoken to between now and early 2020. I've spoken to detrans women who had the hysterectomy. So they're never having kids. And they're now going to be on estrogen for the rest of their lives because they basically hit the menopause at 22 years old. And sometimes it blows my mind when you sit and you speak to these people. Now listen, there was issues that led me to seek transition that other detrans people won't relate to. Some of them will, some of them won't. For me personally, it was trauma. And then it was the whole host of others as well. But from that I got, I don't just hate being a woman, I need to be a man. I should have been born a man. I'm trans, I have dysphoria. And then I went to my gender clinic and they were like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. I've spoken to other detrans women and they bring up a whole host of shit that I never even would have considered. Things like eating disorders and grief and other forms of abuse and struggling with sexuality and shame and being bullied and being lonely and struggling with depression and anxiety and just a whole bunch of other stuff. So to me, gender dysphoria has become more complicated than it used to be, and it's always been complicated. It used to be, you're born with it. But my gender dysphoria, if it is indeed gender dysphoria, it was diagnosed as gender dysphoria, so that's what we'll go with, and it meets the definition. Gender identity having a mismatch with your biological sex. I wasn't a trans kid, and I told that to the specialist at the gender clinic. The evaluation that I got was, to put it politely, incredibly lackluster. But one of the questions he asked the gender specialist was, when did your gender dysphoria manifest? And I told him outright, I didn't feel the need to lie. I wasn't a trans child. My gender dysphoria manifested in my teens. And he was like, okay, and he wrote that down. There was no exploration of why you can be a perfectly normal, happy, healthy kid and then hit your teens when you start to develop sexually and suddenly go, I hate being a woman. Do you think maybe something could have happened that you should perhaps talk about with this person that you're about to prescribe irreversible cross-sex hormones to? But he didn't. And even though there was red flags popping up all over the place, he didn't ask for clarification. He didn't expand. He had a checklist of these questions that he had to ask. He asked those questions and moved on to the next one. And within a matter of months, I was sticking testosterone into my thigh. And I speak to a lot of other detrans people, men and women, who got even worse than I did. I wish they could come out publicly, and I understand why they wouldn't. Detrans people, I'm not fucking coming out. I'm dealing with all these other very complicated, severe problems. I am not coming out publicly just to be shamed and insulted and threatened. Spoken to a lot of detrans people who were like, I got testosterone in my first appointment. I got testosterone in my second appointment when I was 19. And I'm just like, something that is probably going to make some people very uncomfortable. And that is when your child comes out as trans and you know that it's because of social contagion. I get messages from parents more often than I get from other detrans people. I understand that they're desperate. My mum and my sister told me that when they sought help, some support, some counselling while I was going through detransition, they were made to feel like the scum of the earth. They were made to feel like transphobic pieces because they had some questions about their daughter and sister who had never spoken about a desire to transition, suddenly wanting to transition. They were made to feel like beneath the shoe, the people who were supposed to be offering the support. So I understand everyone is different. I wasn't a trans kid, so I don't know what it's like to be a child in that situation. All I can say is if your kid is in distress and something may have happened, then they need help. But then I feel like an asshole for saying go and take them to a professional, because I know how bought and caught up the professionals are. I've been there. I've seen how much they're terrified of anything other than affirmation only. My heart breaks and bleeds for parents right now. I can't imagine being in that situation. But what I will say is, if your child is coming out with an issue with their gender identity, the first thing is you should try and talk to them. If you take them to a gender clinic, they will ignore every other issue and they will focus only on gender issues. And when I say focus on gender issues, I mean they will affirm only. And we know that when kids go on puberty blockers, the vast majority of them continue on to cross-sex hormones. And if you engage in watchful waiting and you don't put this child on puberty blockers, the vast majority of them desist, and most of them turn out just to be gay kids. Basically what's going on is we're transing gay kids. It's conversion therapy. That's what's happening. Even if you don't have a kid, even if you have a teenager, first of all, just try and talk to them about yourself. Tell them why you're concerned. My mum and my sister, after detransition, I've had a lot of very long, deep, intimate conversations with them, and they've told me, we knew you were making a mistake from the beginning, but we didn't want to say anything because you were so mentally unwell and you were so vulnerable, and we didn't want to risk you cutting us off so that we couldn't keep an eye on you. There was a window of time, and that window of time is prior to medicalization. If you have a loved one or a friend who has very suddenly come out, seemingly out of the blue, desiring to transition, you need to tell them why you're concerned. And don't be an asshole about it. Don't be like, you're wrong. Just be like, I'm just concerned because you've never mentioned this before, and you've been struggling with depression and anxiety, and there's signs that you have an eating disorder, all of this stuff. Try to talk to them about it. I'm not saying it will work, okay? And I'm sorry, the advice that I can give will not apply to everyone. So there might be a parent listening to this going, you don't know my kid. But my advice remains the same. Tell them your concerns. Tell them why you're concerned. Because the window that I had was between 2013 and 2015. I hadn't medicalized by that point because I was on the waiting list, and you don't get any therapy, or I didn't get any therapy while I was on the waiting list. Had my mum or my dad or my sister or any of my friends sat me down and said, there's this thing that happened, and this thing that happened, and this thing that happened, and all this stuff, and now suddenly you're identifying as trans. Is that maybe connected? Can we kind of talk about that a little bit more? And I don't know how it would have went. It's entirely possible I would have been like, nah, I'm going to transition anyway. But we'll never know because they didn't do it. And they love me and they'd go to hell and back for me, so I'm not bad-mouthing them in any way. I'm just saying I believe there was a window of opportunity prior to medicalization where I could have been dissuaded from transition.